Well, I'm so happy to see all of your faces. Can you hear me okay? So this panel has been organized by Gabriela, Aceves, Sepúlveda, and Amanda Gutiérrez and myself. And we're very happy to welcome you, Suzanne Thorpe and Amanda Lourenço Jacometi. So in this panel, our idea behind it was to build on Marcela Legrade's concept of sororidad, which is understood as a non-binary, ethical, political, and practical dimension of contemporary feminisms. And in this track, we consider sono-sororidades as a critical frame to look at the sonic dimensions of patriarchy. As a feminist intervention in the archives of sound art, Sono-sororidades makes visible how sound and gender constructions intersect with one another. It highlights the potential of the sonic to unveil and make audible unequal power dynamics where gendered violence and exclusion are perpetuated. We seek to listen to what sono-sororidades sound like and explore together its political potential in creating non-exclusionary sounding futures and resounding pasts and presents. To do so, we invite historical and theoretical papers, research creation projects that make visible the contribution of women and LGBTQ artists in sound art, including composition, technological intervention, media arts, radio and podcast productions, and other projects that have opened, created, and disseminated feminist and independent spaces for sound production across the globe. So here today with us, we're really happy to have Suzanne Thorpe, who is a composer, performer, researcher, and educator who holds an MFA in electronic music and media from Mills College and a PhD in integrative studies from the University of California, San Diego. Suzanne is currently a Mellon Teaching Fellow and lecturer in music at Columbia. We're also really excited to have Amanda Lourenço Jacometi, who is an artist, educator, and researcher. She's currently pursuing her master's in music, culture, and society at UNESPA and in sonology, processes of creation and sound production at USP. So thank you everyone for being here today. And I am joining you, just a quick note, from the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations in Vancouver. So I have made it so we can all share our screens. Suzanne, would you like to share and we can take it away?
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, so I'm sharing the screens. So with my students, I have come to think of this process as a performance art piece, the sharing the screen. I've asked them to rate me whenever they can. Sometimes they're kind, sometimes they're not. But I just want to say thank you before we get going to the organizers, all of you, and your extensive efforts, and to anyone that might be joining us today in our conversation. It's really fantastic to be a part of this event, and I'm looking forward to hearing everything that's happening at this conference. I'm joining you today from unceded Mohegan land, now known as Catskill in the upper Hudson Valley of New York. And I'll be talking to you about a recipe for belonging in technical learning environments. A quick summary about my background. My creative research takes place as sound art, performance, and texts, and I engage in a variety of technologies in my work. In my performances and installations, I primarily focus on distributed compositional systems and non-anthropocentric music-making techniques. But more relevant to today's discussion is my contributions to electronic music educational environments via the organization I work with, Techni. Techni is an arts education initiative I co-founded in 2010 with Korean-American electronic improvising musician and educator Bonnie Jones. To summarize, Techni deconstructs barriers in technical learning environments by leveraging practices in creative technology fields. We give workshops that instruct in basic circuitry, signal flow, and introductory practices in digital domains. We work nationally and internationally, primarily through collaborations with local grassroots organizations who also address and tend to the effects of the intersectional forces of race, gender, class, and sexuality. And I was super happy to see that Amanda will be talking about a Girls Rock Camp as well, following my talk. Our workshops are steeped in the premise that, as cognitive archaeologist Lambros Malaforis puts it, our thinking body is but a constituent in the, quote, broader cognitive process that exists as a relationship among brains, bodies, and things, unquote. In other words, what we know is an ongoing psychophysio co-construction between us and the many bodies of our environments, including our tools and sound. And techne, or craft, in the Greek sense of the word, can be leveraged in that co-construction. We started Techne in part to counteract our early experiences entering the electronic music field in the late 20th century, which was a time infused with the sense that the tools and aesthetic norms of the field were primarily the domain of Western white cis men. This narrative prevailed even though we now know that there was a robust diversity of contributors to early computer science and engineering through the mid-20th century in the West, including software programmers Melba Roy Mouton or Francis V. Spence and Beatrice Worsley, and engineers Edith Clark and Lillian Gilbreth, just to name a few. In addition, if we listen beyond normative tellings of the development of real and pure electronic sound, we hear electric guitarist Sister Rosetta Thorpe, Fluxus and sound artist Yoko Ono, and electronic music composer Alida Vasquez, who Teresa Diaz de Castillo will speak about later at this panel, or not at this panel, in this conference. And if we gaze beyond the horizon of the Northwestern Hemisphere, as critical theory and electronic media artist Ashwata Marisa has pointed out, we see that global high tech has evolved in part because of the significant contributions of often oppressed transnational labor. However, normative white male figures were frequently, as feminist theorist Sandra Harding put it, the, quote, historically identifiable creators, unquote, of the tools and the milieu which reflected their particular hierarchical and binary-bound social projects, which conditioned those who worked within it. So we asked how sound and electronic instruments could instead support a broad field of participants and contrastingly contribute to social projects that are distributed and collaboratively co-constructed. We asked how can this field hold space for gendering as opposed to a fixed idea of gender and account for our fluid multiplicities of being. Our response was what we've termed a pedagogy of flow. Activities that Jones has framed as a non-didactic, body-based, intuitive, and pleasurable, the opposite of normative Western European humanist markers of value. Our recipe, which I'll describe going forward, includes embedding technical projects with critical tactics such as craft, listening, and musical improvisation to encourage sensibilities of belonging in technical learning environments. Researchers at the 2016 Institute of Electrical an Electronic Engineers, Frontiers in Education conference, summarized that female student interest in STEM fields increased when greater attention was paid to empathy and belonging in STEM-focused lessons. In addition, studies in Australia found that cultural inclusivity improved learning for Indigenous communities and digital tools. These studies and others complement STS theorist Marie Puy de la Bellacasa's thesis that sensibilities of care, empathy, and belonging affect our knowledge production and should be central when addressing issues of exclusion and critiques of power. But to build a program that resists hegemonic narratives of techno-masculinist environments, I encourage us to listen to the goals and actions of figures such as Black feminist activist Barbara Smith, who envisioned what she called, quote, a beloved community, unquote, one that recognizes everyone's full humanity in her social justice work. In Smith's many endeavors, which range from the Combahee River Collective of the 1970s to more recent work in Black Lives Matter, she and her colleagues engaged in strategies that cultivated a sense of belonging to achieve social and cultural transformation. These include non-hierarchical organizing principles and care-engendering activities that embrace sharing, collectivity, personal experience, and perspective, as well as the emotional plane. Similar to these restorative and social justice practices, we've created a constellation of activities designed to ferment individual and collective identity formations, as well as agential and personalized relationships with technical learning transformation. The starter for Techni's recipe for a pedagogy of flow is a technical learning activity that instructs in basic principles of electronic and technology skills, such as contact mic or oscillator builds. These projects afford hands-on, embedded, and embodied learning of foundational concepts that construct higher-order technical activities. After an introductory lesson, we place students into groups so they can help each other with the tricky details of soldering and circuit design, emphasizing care and collective action in building. Once their basic instrument is created, students then design the containers or resonators for their instruments. This activity is one of a few that bring out the bright flavors of students situated in subjugated imaginaries of what an instrument can be. Using found objects, students' designs range from deeply personalized expressions of self to environmentally expansive or highly experimental insights about sounds. So I don't know if you can see the image on one side here. The student has inserted test tube beakers into a resonating box, which she's attached a contact mic that she built to, so the possibilities abound with that particular instrument. Which was amazing to see. We then add listening sessions. Because listening centers inclusion and resists clear hierarchical divisions, it's a primary activity in restorative and social justice movements. For instance, Bay Area restorative justice practitioners Rose Elizondo and Jovita Ross insist that listening affords, quote, a new way of relating in community where we began to see each other's humanity, unquote. For Black feminist theorists such as Patricia Hill Collins and Alice Walker, it's a place where healing happens and non-dominant social formations can be found. And, as sound studies and democracy theorist Jessica Feldman noted in her study of listening and social movements, active listening, quote, allows for a felt dissolution of neoliberal individual subjectivity. This dissolution of the primacy of the individual is essential to cultivating the sense of empathy and community required for a successful democracy and for sharing of resources, unquote. We frequently listen with practices developed by composer, electronic musician, and deep listening founder Pauline Oliveros, who you see figured here. Weaving together a web of childhood musical experiences with feminist and queer strategies, Oliveros composed a noetics of listening that confused binaries associated with listening and sounding and intervened on hierarchies attributed to their value. For Oliveros, the common referent of heard sound was a situated manifestation of, quote, more than one reality simultaneously, unquote, that generated interpersonal, communal, and environmental communication and construction. In Techne, sitting in a circle, we quietly gather to listen for sounds within and around us. We listen for how sounds feel in our elbows, our stomachs, or our knees, how our neighbors and things sound in and around us, and how sound interacts with environments. Inevitably, students emerge from our listening sessions with a focused, rich, and almost humbling sense of complexity and relationship with their environments and their connectedness. We also fold in musical improvisation as a way to raise up non-idiomatic sounding and multiple musical literacies for those who, as Jones stated, may otherwise, quote, be dissonant to their cultural or familial racial makeup, unquote. Musical improvisation is an experiment with non-hierarchical forms, as there is no designated author, and creates space for expressions of self, community, collaborative action, and distributed creativity. As detailed by musicologist, composer, and member of the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, George Lewis, improvisation privileges emergent, situated, and subjugated relationships as, quote, structure, meaning, and context arise from the domain-specific analysis, unquote. This type of music making necessitates listening and presence and amplifies entanglement as it arises. This in turn deflates notions of individual control and inflates sensibilities of interconnectedness and its effects. It is a slightly daring and non-normative place for students to experiment with their uniquely designed electronic instruments and have their chosen expressions be heard. To close, I invite you to listen for just a moment for what belonging sounds like. Close your eyes, take a breath, and oralize this sense. Musicologist Georgina Bourne asserted that music can function to, quote, destabilize and reorchestrate not only affect and desire, but criteria of belonging and affiliation, and therefore new collective solidarities, unquote. Similarly, we have found that our recipe animates collective action and social identity formation through lateral and collaborative learning and consciously attentive engagement. Our recipe effectively destabilizes dominant narratives and creates new touchstones for belonging in technical fields. In a Techne workshop, belonging is our Sono-soro, or sororidades, and it sounds messy, poetic, funny, angry, aggressive, romantic, sweet, and faint. Or something like this. Sounds emerge out of a pedagogy of flow that works with students' widely vacillating sense of self and connects from what that they had previously held to be an unknowable space. After our sound experiments, in focus feedback groups and anecdotal comments, students without fail make comments such as, I can't believe I just did that, or I never thought I could make something like that. This moment, when a student understands that they can have an experience of belonging in a technical learning environment that is inclusive of a multiplicity of selves, is what we work to generate. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was amazing. Oh, so interesting. Should we move on to Amanda and then do questions at the end? Yeah? Okay. And we can have a conversation a bit more. Thank you, Suzanne. That was really great. And I have some questions for you after. Amanda Jacometi, would you like to share your screen?
Yes. Let me see. Here. Are you seeing this?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay. Now, okay. And so I'm gonna present this in my language, Portuguese. So I'm gonna try to do both English and Portuguese, and then we will figure it out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Então, o nome da minha pesquisa né, eu vou falar um pouco sobre o Girls Rock Camp Brasil. I'm gonna talk about Girls Rock Camp Brasil. E o meu subtítulo é Música, Feminismo, Anticapitalismo e Heterotopia. E antes de começar a falar sobre o Girls Rock Camp, eu vou explicar o que é o Girls Rock Camp para quem não conhece. Então, o que é o Girls Rock Camp Brasil? O Girls Rock Camp é uma ONG, criado em Portland em 2001, nos Estados Unidos, e foi trazido para Sorocaba, São Paulo, em 2013, pela socióloga e guitarrista Flávia Biggs. E o que é exatamente? Como funciona? Durante uma semana, meninas e gêneros dissidentes, né? Em uma semana, ficam imersos em um ambiente todo composto por mulheres e dissidências de gênero. E nessa uma semana, assistem a diversas oficinas e têm aulas de instrumento. Então, nessa uma semana, elas precisam formar uma banda e, no final da semana, tocam uma música própria, se apresentando com essa banda. E se eu for definir um objetivo para o Girls Rock Camp, tem como objetivo ser um local que estimula debates estimule a coletividade e debate acerca de questões sociais através da música, promovendo também a autoestima de meninas e dissidências de gênero. Então, essa palavra, autoestima, é muito importante para entender como funciona todo o programa. This is a picture from the last day in 2019. The year I was a volunteer there, I was a guitar teacher. Eu fui instrutora de guitarra, and this was the last day, the concert. E antes de começar a discutir, a falar sobre o que eu quero falar, I'm gonna present myself. So because I started and I said enough about myself, so this is the moment when I'm gonna do this. Então eu vou me apresentar. Meu nome é Amanda. Eu me identifico como mulher. Sou musicista, sou estudante de música. Eu faço, mestrados em 2 lugares. Eu faço mestrado em música, cultura e sociedade na Unespar e em sonologia na USP. E eu fui campista do Ladies Rock Camp, que é a versão adulta do Girls Rock Camp, para mulheres de 21 anos para cima, 21 years old to. Eu fui campista no Ladies Rock Camp e no ano seguinte eu fui voluntária. Então, depois de ser campista, de sofrer a ação do Girls Rock Camp, eu fui voluntária E quando eu fiz essa pesquisa, foi muito importante porque eu fui fazer uma etnografia e acabou sendo uma autoetnografia, porque eu me identifiquei com várias questões do que elas tratavam e o próprio ambiente do Girls Rock Camp fez uma mudança na minha vida. E para começar a falar, eu trago um texto da Bell Hooks, que é O Olhar Opositor, The Oppositional Gaze, e ela fala como, desde cedo, nas nossas relações familiares, nós somos ensinados sobre o significado de olhar certo, olhar errado. E de que forma esses olhares são influenciados pela nossa história, e a nossa história com esse recorte dominante, tal como pelas representações estruturais binárias que nós somos atravessados na nossa vida. Então, o nosso olhar acaba recebendo filtros, né? E a gente acaba se acostumando a ver coisas e naturalizar essas coisas porque acaba sendo normal. E aí tem um outro conceito que fala sobre isso, que é o conceito de violência simbólica do Pierre Bourdieu, que fala sobre uma violência que é tão imposta, tão naturalizada, que a gente nem percebe muitas vezes quando acontece. When you came into a room of musicians and there's only white men, and there is common because that was society creates. So, então esse olhar acaba ficando naturalizado, acaba sendo normal entrar em um lugar e ver um tipo de pessoa, ou ver apenas homens, ou apenas white men, apenas homens brancos em um lugar, porque são reflexos de como a nossa sociedade é estruturada, de como nós somos estruturadas socialmente. E no Girls Rock Camp, para entender como funcionava o Girls Rock Camp, eu separei em 3 aspectos do nome, né? Girls, Rock and Camp. Em Girls, eu falei sobre machismo na música, o silenciamento de mulheres e a divisão sexual do trabalho. E isso eu me incluo como uma mulher musicista, né, o quanto eu me identificava com essas questões, porque eu vivencio isso como uma mulher e uma mulher musicista. E na segunda parte eu falo sobre o rock como gênero musical e contracultura, e suas transformações até o punk e o movimento feminista do Riot Girls. E a terceira parte, Camp, eu falo sobre o conceito de heterotopia do Foucault, que é um lugar desviante que denuncia as violências das normas ditas do mundo normal. Então, o nome desse slide é O Pessoal é Político, The Personal is Political, porque tem muito a ver também com o que eu vivencio como pessoa. Então, na primeira parte, Girls, eu falo sobre mulheres da música, Women in Music, e principalmente do conceito de divisão sexual do trabalho, que seria as funções de homem e funções de mulher, like pink and blue and girl, boy, these binary divisions. E o quanto isso acaba nos influenciando na nossa vida, e quanto isso influencia também, de novo, no nosso olhar, na forma que a gente olha para as coisas. E eu trouxe alguns dados de uma pesquisa que eu fiz para o meu trabalho de conclusão de curso sobre ingressantes nos cursos de composição nas faculdades do Rio de Janeiro. I'm from Rio de Janeiro. E lá eu fiz uma estatística dos ingressos nos anos de 2009 a 2019, e eu descobri que no curso da UFRJ, 93% das pessoas que ingressaram no curso de composição em 10 anos são homens, e só 6,7% são mulheres. Isso quer dizer que a cada 15 pessoas, uma mulher fazia parte do curso de composição. E como isso é muito presente, essa coisa do olhar, que a gente está acostumada a entrar num ambiente no ambiente, por exemplo, de música e não encontrar mulheres, não encontrar diversidade. E eu trouxe também uma estatística recente do ECAD, que é o órgão responsável por direitos autorais aqui do Brasil, e dos 100 compositores mais bem pagos em 2020, só 2 mulheres apareciam nessa lista. Então, mesmo que a gente esteja crescendo como dentro do meio musical, a gente ainda não está sendo bem paga. E isso também se reflete muito sobre como a música foi construída, de que forma a história da música foi construída, que é uma história da música que pega como base uma história europeia, né? Tem códigos europeus e tudo vindo da Europa, e se você abre um livro de história da música, por exemplo, você só vai encontrar homens compositores. Então, de que forma isso vai passando uma informação para o nosso olhar de que isso é normal ter poucas mulheres e muitos homens nesse ambiente. E o que o Girls Rock Camp vai fazer é tentar, nessa uma semana, questionar isso e falar sobre isso. Então, em uma semana, as campistas, as pessoas que vão para lá participar, têm aulas de instrumento, guitarra, baixo, bateria, teclado e voz. Tem oficinas, participam de diversas oficinas, como oficina de composição, flyer, cartaz, fanzine, stencil, expressão corporal, ritmo e compasso. É o momento de falarem sobre essas violências. Então, você está participando, você está se divertindo, você está aprendendo a tocar um instrumento, mas você também está questionando e debatendo sobre o seu meio, né? O lugar onde você está. E eu destaco aqui que a importância desse lugar com apenas mulheres e dissidências, porque é isso, elas estão no lugar 100% composto por mulheres e dissidências. Então, na recepção, são mulheres e dissidências de gênero, na cozinha, nos instrumentos, estão em todo lugar, não tem um lugar para tal pessoa e um lugar para tal pessoa, elas estão em todos os lugares. Então, o quanto esse espaço causa um acolhimento, the sense of belonging, e uma sensação de ser ouvida, né? De você estar de escuta, e como isso amplia também, como você acaba estando num lugar que, mesmo que as vivências sendo diferentes, você sabe que todo mundo está lá com o mesmo objetivo, né? Que é romper essas violências do patriarcado. E uma coisa importante é que nos intervalos bandas eram chamadas para tocar, e eram bandas majoritariamente compostas por mulheres, também para ter essa representatividade, né? Para você ver mulheres tocando, mulheres e dissidência de gênero tocando. E aí, na parte do rock, eu falei do rock como um símbolo, o rock como uma forma de romper a cultura dominante. Ele surgiu como isso, e quando ele surgiu, veio esse desejo de mudanças nessa lógica de consumo, liberdade do corpo, negando ou ressignificando os valores vigentes. E aí o rock vai, né, subdividindo e vão criando outros gêneros musicais, e dentre eles o punk rock. E o punk vem com esse lema do faça você mesmo, do incomodar para mostrar o incômodo, derrubar para reconstruir. E muito nessa proposta de você pode fazer qualquer coisa, né? E esses movimentos foram muito importantes, né, para o Girls Rock Camp, principalmente porque esses movimentos também carregaram muito sexismo, né? O movimento punk e o movimento rock são movimentos que tinham muita violência contra a mulher, e isso trouxe várias revoltas, né, para as mulheres que faziam isso. E dentre esses incômodos, né, surgiu o Riot Girls, que o girl vem com R, girl, de raivoso, porque veio justamente desse incômodo de mulheres querendo fazer partes do meio musical e querendo fazer parte como, né, estar lá e ser reconhecida, e também para uma forma de denúncia de todas as violências que elas sofriam. Então, o Girls Rock Camp, o Riot Girls, começou mais ou menos nos anos 80 e teve como uma das principais percussoras a Kathleen Hanna, que foi vocalista e compositora do Bikini Kill. E quem participava do Riot Girls eram contra essa indústria musical sexista, né, que vendia muito a imagem da mulher, a imagem não a mulher como compositora, a mulher como criativa, e sim a imagem física da mulher. E elas buscavam um papel mais ativo nas bandas e no palco, verbalizando as suas indignações que perpassavam dentro por essas ideias do punk, de faça você mesmo, você pode fazer o que você quiser, vamos questionar o sistema sim, e também pelas ideias do feminismo. E foi também no Riot Girls que surgiu o Girls to the Front, que era a ideia de para as garotas irem para frente e se manifestarem e se verem outras mulheres fazendo música e criando e tudo mais. E o que é importante dizer é que elas não se manifestavam só pela música, mas também por fanzines. Elas tinham fanzines, elas faziam, e era uma forma acessível de você mostrar o que você estava pensando e trocar ideias com as pessoas. Essa é a Kathleen Hanna e o Bikini Kill. Então, se eu fosse definir como que seria, né, o Girls Rock Camp, como é essa função do rock, do punk no Girls Rock Camp, é isso, é você utilizar a música como ferramenta, como expressão. E aí eu falo, o objetivo do Girls Rock Camp é sensibilizar e potencializar as vontades de fazer música e dar ferramentas para que isso seja possível. Aí quando eu falo de ferramentas, eu vou falar da oficina de guitarra, que foi a oficina que eu participei, mas tem várias outras formas, né? Tem várias outras oficinas que elas fazem parte, acho que mais de 10 oficinas que elas participam ao longo da semana. Então, na oficina de guitarra, que foi a oficina que eu fiz parte, eu via muito presente essa filosofia do faça você mesma, você consegue. É importante, na hora, eu que estava acostumada com um ensino mais formal de guitarra, e foi muito estranho para mim chegar num ambiente em que eu deixava a minha intuição falar, né? Sem me importar se estava certo, se estava errado, se tinha que botar alguma lógica nos acordes. Não, era algo muito intuitivo, era de você ensinar ferramentas mesmo para a partir daí você criar. Então, tinham poucos acordes, era muita experimentação com o instrumento, a gente passava, sei lá, uns 5 acordes, 6 acordes, a partir daí, geralmente nas cordas mais graves da guitarra, ou power acordes, né? E a partir daí, as pessoas muito improvisavam e iam experimentando. E uma das coisas mais importantes, assim, que para mim foi sobre como a gente elogia, como a gente potencializa esse trabalho, que era nunca elogiar pela beleza. A gente nunca elogiava ninguém pela beleza, e sim pelas potencialidades. A gente não... Porque a gente sabe o quanto mulheres são muito elogiadas pela beleza, pela aparência. E é zero que a gente queria fazer, porque é para estimular justamente a criatividade. Estimular que elas eram possíveis, que elas podiam fazer tudo o que elas quisessem. Isso se refletiu muito na minha experiência pessoal como musicista, o quanto eu passei por isso na minha história e como eu comecei a refletir como as formas de ensino de música, em alguns lugares, era muito tóxica e muito machista, enfim, todas as coisas que a gente já sabe, né? E aí, por fim, a gente chega no conceito de heterotopia, que é do Foucault. E aí eu vou ler o que está escrito no slide, que diz assim: o conceito de heterotopia do Foucault designa uma descrição, uma leitura de diversos espaços que simultaneamente contestam o real do espaço em que vivemos. Cada heterotopia, segundo o filósofo, tem um funcionamento preciso e determinado no interior da sociedade. E a mesma heterotopia pode, segundo as sincronias de cultura em que se encontra, ter vários funcionamentos. Esse lugar heterotópico possui também heterocronias, linhas temporais não homogêneas que carregam consigo utopias, recortes de tempo, espaços de mudanças e reformulações. E aí eu falo que o Girls Rock Camp tem, em sua proposta de empoderamento e promoção da autoestima de crianças e adolescentes, acaba ocupando um espaço heterotópico nessa aparente linha reta, uma linha de fuga ao sistema normativo que fere e apaga corpos e existências. Um local, mesmo com os arredores baseados no sistema capitalista, patriarcal e homofóbico, consegue expor e debater grande parte dessas violências em um ambiente totalmente composto por mulheres e dissidências de gênero. Então, é isso, esse conceito de heterotopia é como se fosse um lugar isolado que seria um não real, mas que, ao mesmo tempo, escancar esse real da sociedade, né? O quanto esse espaço que é criado para ser um lugar de acolhimento, um lugar para a gente pensar sobre essas violências, é muito importante para denunciar essa realidade que a gente vive, para a gente pensar e também ver de que forma a gente olha para esse espaço. E aí, um último ponto que é muito importante também trazer é sobre a questão do anticapitalismo, porque não é possível você ser feminista e não ser e apoiar o capitalismo, né? Justamente porque o capitalismo é um dos responsáveis por esse controle de corpos, e toda a organização da ONG era em autogestão, em coletividade, da gente se ajudar, todo mundo se ajudando. Tem, quando você se inscreve, para você fazer a inscrição para campista, você paga uma taxa, mas essa taxa é revertida para o campo, assim, não tem lucro, não é visado, não é voltado para lucro. E o quanto isso mostra assim, e reafirma que para você ser feminista, para você lutar contra o feminismo, não dá para apoiar o capitalismo, justamente porque é isso. O capitalismo ele busca essa lucratividade a todo custo, e o quanto o sexismo está entranhado nisso, quanto o machismo está entranhado nisso. E aí eu chego na última parte, que é o que eu aprendi, o slide em inglês está depois, eu vou deixar um pouco para vocês depois. E aí eu falo que a coletividade, o estímulo à autoestima e à autonomia de mulheres já são por si só rachaduras nas diversas relações impostas pelo sistema capitalista. E como vou deixar no inglês porque aí eu traduzo simultaneamente, o quanto ser voluntária nesse lugar inteiramente composto por mulheres e dissidências de gênero me fez ver de outras perspectivas pessoas que tinham passado por violências parecidas com a minha, e mesmo que não fosse, me fez ver diferentes olhares do que eu estava acostumada a receber. Assim, você abrir um livro de história da música e você só encontrar homens. Então, eu estava num lugar 100% composto por mulheres e dissidências de gênero que estavam contando suas histórias e falando das suas experiências e sendo atingidas por sendo modificadas por aquela experiência. Então, o quanto aquilo foi muito bom para mim e quanto eu me senti muito acolhida, porque eu não tinha ninguém lá contestando se eu sabia ou não. Eu estava só num lugar de acolhimento, de aprendizagem e de questionamento, principalmente, né? E aí eu falo também de pensar e repensar, pensar e questionar o sistema capitalismo em uma heterotopia, que a heterotopia, o Jacometi, né, foi essencial para solidificar a minha luta feminista. E o mais importante, acreditar na música como uma expressão, uma música como uma ferramenta, né? Que às vezes a gente esquece que a música é uma linguagem, a música, né, ela está relacionada ao fazer, ao nosso ser social, né? Então, como a música é uma expressão, e eu principalmente respeitar a minha história e respeitar a história do outro. E muito, muito interessante, porque o programa tem como função mudar a autoestima das campistas, mas eu, como voluntária, eu sinto que a minha própria autoestima foi mudada. Eu me senti muito mais corajosa quando eu participei dos dois processos, como campista e voluntária. Eu me senti muito mais corajosa para estar nesse ambiente, porque enfim, eu tinha uma coisa mágica tinha acontecido, né? E aí, essa é o último dia, né? O último dia da apresentação, que depois dessa uma semana, todo mundo apresenta as composições e num palco, numa casa de show mesmo, e é muito mágico ver como muda o comportamento, como vem muita atitude, muita vontade de se expressar e de fazer música. E aí eu volto para Bell Hooks, do começo, que fala sobre os nossos olhares, como os nossos olhares se acostumam com essas violências e como elas acabam ficando naturalizadas. Mas o que eu acho muito mais interessante desse texto, que é uma coisa que me prende muito a ele, é que o nosso olhar também é político, o nosso olhar pode trazer mudanças. Então, o quanto é muito importante a gente estar nesses ambientes e mudar a partir de uma mudança do nosso próprio olhar, estimular as mudanças de olhares e olhar diferente. Então, da mesma forma como o nosso olhar acaba repetindo as violências, mas a gente pode também ter o poder de mudar elas. E eu acho que é isso, as fontes, e tá bom. That's it. Foi.
Thank you, Amanda. That was
Thank
amazing.
you.
I love your slides.
Thank you. So, okay.
I feel like those two papers spoke really well together, and they both described in a really interesting way how this concept of sonoridades speaks to the relationships between care, ethics, and activism. And I hope we could just have a little conversation around that. And I have a question first for Amanda. You said that care should be central when critiquing power. And I wonder if you could say a bit more about the relationship between that and what you called pedagogies of flow, and also distributed compositional systems.
I think that was me.
I'm Suzanne, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is about, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I got distracted by wondering if it was about me.
Yeah, sorry about that. You're talking about how care should be central when critiquing power. And I hoped you could just say a bit more about that in relation to what you called pedagogies of flow and also distributed compositional systems. And I wondered how these systems were related to the pedagogies of flow within that context.
Okay, so first, the care and critiquing power. I think one of the things that I've learned from the folks who are well embedded within social justice activism is that there has to be a simultaneous effort for those who are making the critique for care, not just amongst each other and for themselves, but to, as a group, be able to achieve the goals that they are achieving. And that forefronting that care actually helps us to almost like like an ethical barometer, right? You know, in terms of what that critique is, how we treat each other, and or how we even render that critique, right? So if we are having that component as central, then there's many ways that we can be involved in this critique, and there's many voices and many experiences that can be at the table, but that primary elements of care as being central and figured helps to render that critique legible, number one, and also effective. Okay, so that speaks to this bigger idea with the music making, or maybe the care and social justice is the big idea, maybe the different idea in the music making space of how that functions. And it functions by being able to being able to create space and care for the different voices in the room. And we mean that literally as well as figuratively, right? In people's experimentation and creativity. And so that leads me to this idea of this pedagogy of flow that you're asking about, which is a pedagogy that can be flexible, a pedagogy that can embrace, a pedagogy that moves much like sound moves, right? Sound isn't stationary. Sound isn't, a fixed entity. It's always changing and evolving, and we understand it in relationship to everything else that is changing and evolving around us. So when I say a pedagogy of flow, that is what I'm referring to, is a pedagogy that can actuate that reality and understands that as reality, right? And lastly, you were asking about distributed distributed making and how that fits into a pedagogy of flow. And that's really just like a tactic or a strategy to articulate an idea of pedagogy of flow, right? Like distributed composing or musicking or making music, not having a single author, right, allows for the continuous change and evolution, right, the emergent properties of music making, right, to be primary and to be privileged in the music making space. So I think that answers your questions.
Yeah, so interesting. Thank you. Amanda, I loved your paper. Thank you. I wondered if you could say a bit about how the concept of sonoridades influenced the way you approach your own creative practice as a musician.
So I'm gonna try this in English, but my English is very poorly, so sorry. I don't know, when I started to make music and to study music at the university, I never thought about how important is to support other women, because I never saw this kind of violence. I didn't knew it existed at the musical field. I didn't knew, but when I was at the university and I was studying and trying to make stuff, then I realized it was a very, very sexist field, very sexist. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And then when I went to Girls Rock Camp, I knew that when you are in a place with other women and you share your experience and your stories, you understand more your own story. So it was very important to me know other stories, because I could look better and look closer to my own story. So I think the sororidades to support women, it was fundamental to me, because yes, I am a woman, a musician, trying to get through all these obstacles. I forgot the word in English. So I don't know if I answered the question.
You did, yeah.
My English is kind of confused. I don't know, because there is a word in Portuguese. There is sororidades. It's to support women, and sonoridade, it's sound. I don't know which of those words you told me to talk about.
You did it perfectly. You articulated that really well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we maybe open this up now? And if anyone has any questions for Amanda or Suzanne, please just jump right in here.
Hi, I perhaps have a comment, but I'm really thinking about the conversation between both papers, and thank you, Suzanne and Amanda. Those were amazing experiences. I'm thinking how Amanda really foregrounded this concept of heterotopia as a space, that exists within our reality, but as a space of dissidence. And then how Suzanne talked about these experiences as a pedagogy of flow, but through care. And it is care, which actually, the care, and you mentioned the care as the ethical barometer that makes, creates a sense of belonging amongst the participants. So I'm wondering for both, since we are kind of interested in knowing how do sororidades sound like in your projects, because we're kind of combining both words, the sorority and the sonority, to make sure how actually sounds bring up this kind of sense of belonging that, like Suzanne just articulated a lot of the things that we were trying to capture with this word in your concept. But so how does care, like, you showed some examples of how the kids were kind of making. Do you have more specific examples of how does care sound in your I'm going to call them workshops, but I don't know if that's the correct word, and you should correct me. And also, how does care sound in your girls camp, Amanda? And I think that there's also a tension between the collectivity of making in Suzanne's work, and I want to see how Amanda deals with that in the girls camp. Yeah, I don't know. I went for too long, so it's just
with the concept of caring. So I talked about the compliments when someone is playing and you don't say, oh, it's beautiful. No, you say you are good at it, you are creative, we're doing it. And that was very important during the workshop, the way we I forgot the word in both language, Portuguese and English. Incentivar, algo como something like caring. How you can promote self-esteem, how you care about the people who are involved in the process. So I don't know. I think when I thought about caring other people, I thought what would be nice to me, but what I would like to people do. English. What I would like other people could do to care for me. I don't know if I'm being clear. So when I was at the workshops I was teaching, I always thought about young Amanda who was trying to play the guitar, and what I would like to say to her, what I think, what words could have been said to her, and to promote her self-esteem, because I had for a long time lots of problems with self-esteem on playing, like, oh my god, I'm terrible at this. And I only had male guitar teachers, and then I was a female guitar teacher teaching other people. Then I always thought about what I would like to people do. I don't know how to construct the sentence. So I think are you understanding, or I'm just like,
yes, yeah, totally, yeah. And I think it's very interesting how there's this relationship between yourself as a young student and yourself as a teacher. So it's like an individual experience that extends to the collective, which I find it's a very different structure from what Suzanne is talking about. So that's why I like the tension between both of the talks. I don't know if Suzanne wants to add.
Yeah, and in terms of, what does it sound like, and or how does it appear in our workshops? And I should say, we almost all the time collaborate with Girls Rock Camps. So we're so embedded with, we tour nationally, and we have worked with so many Girls Rock Camps around the country. it's kind of, I have like all the t-shirts, it's really a fantastic environment. And Amanda, I'm can't remember where you're located, but I am probably going to be doing some workshops in Santa Barbara this summer. So if I need some help, maybe I'll ping you to come and and give us a hand. But back to the topic at hand here. So this idea of leading with care to, sustain a sense of belonging, I think we understand that, or at least at Techne, we believe that when we lead with care, it's almost impossible to have a toxic dominance. Right? Like, if we go into a space with an understanding of care, then that negates a lot of behavior and notions, right? That kind of it preempts, right, the dominant behaviors and or structures, right, that keep people quiet or feeling inferior, right? So if we're leading with that sense, then it preempts that. It's almost like an antidote, and it also is a way to create a place for sharing, right? So musically, if you're asking about what this sounds like musically, I mean, sometimes it's a hot mess and sometimes it's a cohesive kind of, like really beautiful bloom of sounds. Like it really oscillates between those two spaces because our students are learning, like, what is this? This is really weird. This instrument that that I made is really weird. They're half the time they're really freaked out in one sense, and the other half the time they're totally excited. So which is like the perfect place to be if you want to tilt somebody over the edge of how to think differently about themselves. And we have to handle that with care as well, right? Like it's a vulnerable space. Everybody's doing something that is new and different. So it's also a mandate for us, right? When we're going into this activity and this space, like we're asking them to do things that oftentimes are way out of their comfort zone. Like noise is acceptable to a point. Right? Like there gets to a point where noise is, has very different definitions for everyone. And then there's the opposite, which is quiet and silence, which is acceptable to a point, right? So, we have the mandate to create a space of care as well, for the students to play with those boundaries, right? Amongst themselves, between themselves, and amongst each other. So, how does it sound? Like I said, sometimes it sounds really, crazy, and sometimes it sounds like absolutely gorgeous and, according to my aesthetic sensibilities, right? So there's a lot of leeway there. I wouldn't try to define it aesthetically. Gosh, there was something else there's other ways that it comes about, and not just sonically, right? Like, so we try to structure the learning, like the technical learning, we set them up in groups. We set our students up in groups so that they, like I said, they can help each other. They're teaching each other, right? Care comes into the play. Like some students get the tasks very quickly. They're on it like that, like they get it so quickly. And then there's some that are like afraid to touch a soldering iron, and have to get over whatever. We also give them like a really strong talking to before we start, so that we don't get a lawsuit. But just trying to avoid danger. but it's to have them become responsible for each other, right from the get-go. They're developing this sense of becoming responsible for each other, and doing these tasks that were previously mysteries to them, or they previously, for many of them, some of them, and we're finding in a happy sense, we've been doing this for 10 years, and for the past few years, there's more and more students that are coming to the table that have had a little bit of experience in this or that. So we're, in a way, kind of like working ourselves out of a job a little bit. But, there's way more work to be done, obviously, like way more work. And so we are just continuing to look for other ways that we can expand on these ideas.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning how, I mean, when we ask how does it sound, like we're using sound as a kind of a metaphor instead of using the gaze, but we're also interested in, for example, in our concept of building Sono-soro, how do you build community after the workshops? What happens after Girls Row Camp ends for you, Amanda? What happens after those workshops? Are there any experiences where we can see this care or this heterotopias grow outside of those particular spaces that you create?
Yeah, and many participants return to Girls Rock Camp, like, last year I did guitar, so today I'm gonna do drum lessons, and it's like a continuum. It's they usually come back to do more, to have more of these experience. And there's a moment at the breaks that they talk about how is the experience, how the experience is happening to them, and it's incredible. I saw a girl, I think she was 15, and she was sat at the micro and crying, like, oh my God, Girls Rock can change my life. I came here every year, and I'm much more respectful with myself. And I was like, oh my God, she's only 15, and she's saying that she's respecting herself, and she's caring about herself and the field that she's in. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I had this when I was 15. So they come back to Girls Rock Camp, and I think it spreads to their personal life. So how they relate how they have relationships with people, and how they see each other. It's very impressive. Like it's a change of self-esteem, and when you change your own self-esteem, you can look better to other people, and practice the caring with other people, and be more atento, have more attention with your surroundings. So I guess it's an action that is inside an heterotopia, but spreads to the outside, and change when the action change one person, that one person will change the relations around, and then will spread this idea. I think it happened to me, because after I was at the ladies rock camp, and then I was a volunteer at girls rock camp, I decided to, okay, I am a musician, so I'm gonna do what I'm gonna have to do to make my dream come true, my dream come true. And I decided to study those violence that blinds us, to help other people and to change stories. I like to tell my story and my own experience, my own experience, to hear others, and we can learn with each other. Because when we open history books, we see lots of silences, and then I think when we share our stories and we share our feelings, we can learn more, to be more empathic to be more empathic and more sensible about many stuff that come atravessam. I don't know the words, come through us. I don't know. I think that is it. The caring spreads. I talk more very much about the experience, the self experience, and then go out, and then yeah, I don't know if I answer. I guess I answer it.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I really like how you're both describing this kind of embodied aspect of sound making in community, and then how that both can affect you internally but also ripples out into the community. There's something really powerful about that. Oh, anyone, any other thoughts or comments or ideas about the relationships between these two papers? It's a lot to take in. I feel like I need some time to think about it.
I just wanted to say just thank you for the opportunity to think about how what we do, the way that you framed these questions, to think about how what we do exposes the lack or the paucity, right, in other environments. You know, that is kind of a consequence of these rich experiences, is that it exposes the opposite, right, of other environments. And it was really interesting for me to think about how what we do really starkly, you know, creates a contrast to which, you know, obviously was the intent, right? that's why we did what we did. But to think of it so clearly and succinctly in this way through this idea of Sono-soro was a nice opportunity. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Both very interesting papers. And I really enjoy your idea of pedagogy of flow as an educator in a university setting. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how can I use this on my teaching? How can I employ it for doing a less oppressive, you know, form of teaching in our courses? And obviously the grassroots kind of embodiment and rebelliousness of Amanda's Girls Rock. But yeah, I'm just like really inspired by both models of
We have, there's an essay that Bonnie and I did, and it's really just her and I interviewing each other and talking about this idea of pedagogy of flow, and that was the initial introduction. I had started thinking about what we do in that way because I was challenging myself to think about pedagogy as something that moves right along with everyone else, right? And instead of something that is static and stagnant and can be as flexible as everybody else that's in the room, right? So that was when I started riffing on that idea. But if you're interested, I can. It's in an anthology. And what is the name of the anthology? Let me, I can send it to you if you just email me. I'm happy to either send you a link or crop out the paper for you, and I can send that to you. So.
Thank you. That would be amazing. Yeah, we'll share it. Yeah, I found the title and the approach fascinating. Yeah.
I'm hoping this, or not hoping, I know this year I will be running a symposium at Columbia talking about strategies of belonging in technical learning environments. So just heads up. More will be revealed, as we say, and hopefully it will be a presentation by a number of my colleagues and from all different facets. Amanda, maybe you know Freya. She heads up the Willie Mae Girls Rock Camp in New York. She'll be presenting with us, and another colleague of mine, Lauren Hayes, who works with disabilities and sound, and a few others are going to be participating in this as well. So, it's really about exchanging ideas, and that's another thing that I like the way that you frame this as a working group. I don't think anybody has all the answers, and I certainly don't, but hopefully we can do more sharing soon. So.
That's great. Thank you. I don't know how everyone's feeling. Any more questions? I don't know if Marina, you've been here with us. I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to introduce yourself? You don't have to ask anything, but it would just be nice to know who you are and what you do, and see how your interests relate to the talk.
Hi, I'm colleague of Amanda. I study in USP, and I have a question. My English is terrible.
We can also do it in Spanish if you prefer and translate.
Ok. Minha pergunta para a Amanda é sobre a pré-produção do Girls Rock Camp. Se existe, como que elas se articulam entre si, se há uma preparação das professoras, reuniões para esse evento, né?
Can I translate really quickly, or do you want to translate, Amanda? So I think that Mariana asked you about how do you prepare the pre-production that comes before the Girls Rock Camp. How do the teachers or the leaders talk to each other? What kind of things you do to set up the camps?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do again both, but I'm better in Portuguese. So yes, we have the volunteers came earlier to the camp. So we have two days preparation. We have some workshops too, and we have vou tentar falar em português, que acho que eu não vou me enrolar tanto. A gente participa de workshops também, de que forma a gente pode como pode ser feito esse ensino, né? E aí, principalmente, tem umas dinâmicas também para cooperação, né? Porque a gente vai trabalhar em grupo durante uma semana, mais de uma semana, então como a gente pode dialogar, de que formas. A gente tem uma oficina de comunicação não violenta, né? Non-violence communication. I don't know if it's right. So, a gente tem uma oficina de comunicação não violenta, de que forma a gente pode comunicar, né? A gente vai estar tentando passar uma mensagem ali, então a gente tem que ser muito cuidadoso assim, o tempo todo. E também a gente passa por oficinas também, né? Eu falei de comunicação não violenta, e a gente tem, sim, 2 dias de preparação. Todo dia, depois do acampamento, a gente faz uma assembleia para a gente discutir questões, assim, apareceu uma questão aqui, como é que a gente pode lidar? É muito essa coisa da cooperação. E, por exemplo, você se inscreve como voluntária, né? Você não recebe nada, e as pessoas do camp se mobilizam para achar um lugar para você ficar em Sorocaba, né? Porque eu sou do Rio de Janeiro, e aí eu ir para São Paulo, né? Para você não arcar com nada, e até a própria alimentação, assim, a própria alimentação vem do camp também, então você paga muito pouco para estar lá, então é um bastante estímulo, assim, e é isso, a gente se prepara bastante para né? Principalmente sobre essas questões de elogio, de como fazer elogio, como a gente incentiva essas pessoas, como, enfim, meio que isso. A gente faz uma preparação uns 2 dias, a gente monta. Uma coisa importante é que o lugar que acontece o Girls Rock Camp é cheio de cartazes e com fotos de mulheres tocando, e frases assim, tipo, eu posso. Frases motivacionais, assim, legais, assim, de mulheres juntas podem, né, frases lembretes, né? Então, qualquer lugar que você anda no prédio, você vê essas frases, e são cartazes que a gente pendura, a gente faz. Então, é todo um trabalho bem construído, assim. Então, tem uma preparação bastante bem construída para chegar no dia do acampamento, na semana, a gente, né? E até a gente é responsável, tem as pessoas responsáveis pela limpeza, por exemplo, mas todo mundo se ajuda se necessário. Vamos aqui limpar tal coisa, beleza, a carregar coisa, a gente fala o trabalho de formiguinha. Então, vai uma passando para outra até a gente chegar a uma coisa pesada, sabe? Então, é muito... É isso, é muito legal, inclusive, essa preparação.
Thank you. I'm going to try to translate, but I don't know if I got everything, so you guys have to help me. So I think Amanda said that before the camp starts, there's a reunion with all the volunteers and the guides, and then you walk through several ways that the camp works. Especially, you have a workshop or a discussion about about nonviolence communication. And then what I got is, like, every day after the camp, the volunteers and the guides get together and discuss anything that came up. You also said something about the space that I lost a little bit, but
the cartazes. Como é cartaz?
Posters.
Oh yeah,
posters.
The space is always, like, decorated with posters by women musicians and composers, and has slogans that are positive, and that's so the girls or the participants can always get inspired and see themselves reflected. We also talked about cleaning the space, and how everyone that's participating, I guess not the participants, but the leaders and the volunteers, help in making the space a nice space. Yes. I don't know if I missed anything else. And I guess in terms of Suzanne, I don't know if you want to talk about how do you organize your workshops in the sense of getting to comparing the two, or thinking about the two. I know you work closely with Bonnie.
Yeah, Bonnie Jones is my, she founded it with me. And so we designed everything together. We have other folks that work with us we've for a little while, we were doing this Teach the Teachers kind of a workshop, where we would lead a workshop for people that wanted to work with our pedagogy, basically, and our curriculum. So we had a few folks go through that and to prepare them to be able to do our workshops. And that involved like a day-long symposium, basically, so that we could walk them through our logic, basically, and also give them the workshop so that they had the experience of taking the workshop, but also had, a longer discussion and reference points for what our logic is behind each of these components. It's really not that different than what I just talked to you about. But we also give them materials where, actually I have like a whole listening doc that I prepared. I'm also happy to share that with you all if you're interested, because I wanted to do it for Amanda. This is nothing you don't know, and I'm talking about Amanda Gutierrez. I, but you're welcome to it, and I'm happy to share it with you. It's just got some like quick and dirty listening exercises. I'm a deep listening, person. I studied with Pauline, so it maps out some of those. But we also use techniques, other listening, techniques from other folks as well, so we have handouts per module, right? So that reference materials per module, so that instructors can have something to reference. But we also really like having different personalities at the table and different, I was experimenting with this concept of recipe, right? Because, your recipe for, cinnamon rolls are going to be very different than my recipe for cinnamon rolls, right? But they're both called cinnamon rolls. So, I'm just like, I'm interested in thinking about this as something where everybody brings their own ingredients to it, and there's a basic understanding that there's flour and sugar and some sort of liquid and things like that are going to come together for this sticky sweet treat, but we're probably going to have different takes on those ingredients, right? We have different tastes for them according to our own personal perspectives and our location and where we're at and all of those and our goals. So we really like having other folks bringing their own techniques and experiences to the table, as long as they kind of we just like them to stick to these principles, right? Because it's these principles that we find are the foundations, right, of this this idea that we're trying to go through. So in answer to your question, we're starting to hopefully get to a point where we can just make these reference materials available to anyone so that you can piece them together for yourself, and start, incorporating them into whatever, I hate that word incorporate, sorry, start folding them into, see, if I just use recipe, everything changes. I stop sounding like a capitalist and start sounding like something else. Then, that's something that we're working on, is making these materials available, especially so that, like, in particular, like the camps, the counselors at the camps can lead their own workshops. We just can't do it anymore. We're tired. So.
Thanks for that. Gives us a clear picture of how things work for both spaces. Talking about treats and sticky stuff and yummy stuff. I don't know how everyone's feeling, but we need to reconvene back in an hour, I think, and for our next slot, which that's when Teresa is going to talk about Alicia Vasquez. You mentioned it, Suzanne. Yeah.
Awesome. She's great. She was my TA at UCSD, and I loved working with her. So Teresa, that is.
Yeah. We have also Isadora and Zandra talking about Batucada, and a group of 5 researchers talking about representation in popular Brazilian music. Go ask something, anything.
I lost you a bit there, Gabriela. I don't know if that was my internet. Or
I think it was mine. I just got the notification that my internet is unstable.
I just want to quickly say before we say goodbye, I love this idea of recipes, Suzanne. I think you need to continue that on. That's really great. And I just have a last question for Amanda. If you were thinking about Sono-soro as a recipe for music making and for listening, do you have a recipe for listening that you would share with the girls at the rock camp?
Oh, that's a good question.
Difícil. Eu não sei. Eu vou tentar falar em português, veja aí depois.
Gabriela, can you say it in Spanish?
Uma receita para ouvir, Nossa, é difícil, né? Difícil. Eu acho difícil essa pergunta. Porque para a gente ouvir, a gente precisa estar muito centrada. A gente tem que estar muito aberta para isso, né? Então, para a escuta acontecer, você tem que estar disposta a ouvir, né? Então, eu acho que a receita, primeiro ingrediente da receita é você querer ouvir, né? Porque tem uma diferença, em português tem uma diferença de escutar e ouvir. Uma é você prestar atenção e outra é você só passar, né, o som. Então, se quiser realmente escutar né? Acho que querer, estar disposto a querer. Eu acho que a primeira, acho que é a coisa central. Você só consegue ouvir se você quiser mesmo, assim, se você direcionar as suas atenções para isso. Porque se for só uma coisa passando, não funciona. Então, é você estar presente para que isso aconteça. Não sei se dá para traduzir.
I'm going to try to translate, but I must declare that I don't speak Portuguese. I just speak Spanish, and I'm trying to. So I think you said that it was you were addressing the difference between listening and hearing, like between escuchar y oír, escuchar and oír, I think. And so you wanted to tell the girls to be present, to be open, to be in a disposition to be present and, I guess, open to what's happening. I think that's what you said. Maybe I'm missing something. That would be the recipe. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's maybe a really lovely note to end on, unless anyone else has anything they want to say. Thank you, everyone. This has been so interesting. And I really hope Amanda, Marina, Suzanne, you'll come to some of the other panels if you feel like it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing them. And please tell Teresa I said hello if I don't think I'll be able to. So please tell her I said hello. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I make tons of notes. Really, really good.
Hopefully we'll get a chance to see each other soon.
Yes.
Yeah, because we're really not that far from each other, so that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, and looking forward for sharing and for keeping in touch. So we'll be in touch and hope to see you around the conference.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.